Today's Motorfest episode on Donut Media is cancelled because look what they did to my favorite car.
You don't want to be like this. This is disgusting. This is awful in every way. If I could kill it, I would. But I legally can't. But I've considered it. Ah! Good God! It's hideous. Beautiful in an ugly way, but mostly hideous.
So on that note, we are going to do something different. In this episode, I am going to show off 10 of my favorite cars from the post-game that I've tricked out, that I drive semi-regularly, and that have a strong sentimentality with me. I hope you all enjoy it. Now let's roll the intro. First up, the Nissan Z, which I have affectionately made into black gold. And this is actually a take on the 280ZX Black Gold Edition, which I fell in love with after seeing a commercial for it from the 1980s. This car has been around since the Crew 1, so it's shown up a few times in other places on my channel. Not only do I love how it looks, I love how it drives. It's not the fastest car by any means, but it is respectable, and most of all, it is fun. Next on the list, we have the Grand Cherokee Trackhawk by Jeep. I've mentioned this before, but my mother owns a Grand Cherokee, and I happen to own a Compass or Baby Jeep IRL. It is, of course, on the heavier side, slides around a bit more than I would like, but that all-wheel drive system is prioritized for comfort at highway speeds, so when using it in a game like Motorfest, it just feels like an extension of what I'm used to. And no, the Grand Cherokee my mother has is not a Trackhawk, it is a 3.6-liter economy engine. Moving on, the Hummer H1 Alpha has a lot of character in how it was styled, given there were both military and civilian versions of it. It honestly feels like GM's take on the Jeep Wrangler, which also has roots in military applications. The civilian version you can buy in Motorfest is highly customizable, and IMO, it's a better design than the H2, H3, or H3T ever were. As far as the Hummer EV, which you'll be seeing in a future episode, I would say that truck still looks less like a Hummer and more like a GMC Sierra, just with a wider frame. You just cannot beat the H1's signature design. Speaking of GM vehicles, next on my list is the Chevrolet Silverado. This truck is special to me because this is the truck that I learned how to drive in IRL when I was 16 and 17. Rather, I first learned in the 2006 model. It sadly had a transmission failure, and my father traded up to the 2010 model when that came out, and I was allowed to practice in it with his supervision, of course. Sadly, that truck also blew up in 2020 due to the AFM engine scandal in which thousands of Chevy trucks were afflicted. So my father traded up to the 2020 model, which he still owns and will hopefully last longer than the previous two. GM, please get your shit together. I beg you. Let us change gears and lean more into the luxurious. The Audi TT is the car you buy when you want peak luxury, but your annual income is 5 figures or less. This is like the mid-tier car of any racing game, basically all-wheel drive, respectable Turbo 4, or even a Turbo 5 now. Top speed is around 155 miles an hour, so nowhere near 200, but it will do you well on any technical track where you need quick acceleration and stable cornering. It is just a comfy car, and there's nothing wrong with that, but in a game like Motorfest, we can go much more luxurious and far more grandiose. A car that I absolutely fell in love with, but will never be able to afford the likes of IRL, is the Bentley Bacalar. This car is the definition of excess. The engine is a W12, which is essentially two V6 engines welded together. The styling is very obviously a 1%er kind of aesthetic, and the price tag for one of these cars IRL is more than $1.3 million. But having it in Motorfest, it makes me feel like I am royalty. I will drive this car literally any chance I get. My only wish is that Motorfest had a key map to let you activate the roof module at your convenience, because I'm not normally into convertibles. Alright, what else do we got? How about the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo VI GSR? The Lancer lineup is one of my favorites going back to the days of Need for Speed Underground. I've always driven Lancers in those kinds of games, and I do prefer them over the Nissan Skyline, over the Mazda RX-7, the RX-8, though not quite over the Subaru Impreza. That car is just a boss, and you might even see it in a future showcase. Now, I need to correct something from my Motorfest demo video. I erroneously assumed the Evo VI as well as the Evo X Black Knight were Motorfest exclusive. It turns out they were both actually in the Crew 2, and while you can use the Black Knight in the Made in Japan playlist, to use it in free roam you actually have to own it in the Crew 2 first. Well, that's certainly a bummer. But it's also not to say I don't love my Nissans, especially the GTR Premium. Oh my gosh, this car is sexy in every iteration. It is the true purist, the anti-ricer. It is the car that is so beautifully engineered at the factory that if you even tried to change anything on this car, you would definitely ruin it. When I got this car for a live summit, I was so impressed by how good it felt to drive that it became an immediate favorite. So like the Bacalar, expect to see this one on a few road trip talks. We now have 2 cars left for this episode. A note is that this was not a top 10 list by any stretch. These cars are being presented in no particular order. So the Honda S2000 was actually kind of an unlikely contender. I didn't really like it at first, but then I threw on some carbon fiber as well as some red paint, and suddenly I was in love with it. It's simple, but it's also beautiful. I do jokingly want to point out that from the side it has the shape and profile of a ballet slipper, and I just find that amusing. Make of that information what you will. And now we've come to the final car of today's episode, the Pontiac Firebird Trans Am Turbo 4. And some of you are going to be like, oh, she's only picking it because it has trans in the name. I'll have you know, if I was really that simple, then all my cars would be blue, pink, and white. But yes, I do acknowledge that subconsciously when thinking about this car. But seriously, this car was also featured in an 80s car commercial that led me to fall in love with it. 80s cyberpunk aesthetic is practically written all over this car. All the sharp lines in the bodywork, the all-business nature of the instrumentation. I would drive a car like this IRL, albeit with some modern creature comforts like an Android Auto head unit and a digital HUD accessory. Anyway, that's really all I have for y'all this episode. If you enjoyed it, let me know, either with a like or a comment, and we might do this again. Next episode we'll go back to our regular playlist format, so look forward to it. Thank you so much for watching.